an opening comment?
Yes, opening, please.
Good morning, Council Member Richard Benbow, joined by Manny Chavez and Robert Sines of the Community Development Department. I'll just make a very short opening comment regarding the stimulus expenditures. We're responsible for about $100 million in stimulus money. To date, about 70% of that money has been spent. The remaining 30% has been allocated to projects which are moving forward, some faster than others, but we are very confident at the end of the day we will be able to spend the remaining 30% in a timely fashion.
Let me jump in and ask you a quick question, if I may. Not too long ago, over the holiday season, there was a report that would suggest that we as a city government were doing a pretty good job in obtaining funds, but not a very good job in moving and spending these funds. Now, given what you said, Mr. Benbow, to move 70% is substantial.
Yes.
So what are you doing right that other people may be doing wrong?
Well, I'm certainly not going to speculate on that.
Well, let's just talk about what you're doing right.
But what I will say is that in some of the projects that we're responsible for, it's not as difficult to move the money because it's going to programs that are already in progress. We are supplementing their budget for additional or expanded services. So in those cases, that money was fairly easy to spend. At the other end of the spectrum, for economic development projects where these projects take place over a longer period of time, it's harder to move that money because so many other things have to be in place before you can actually spend the money. It's moving a little slower. But as I said earlier, we are making enough progress in even the slow-moving areas to have confidence that the money will be spent in a timely fashion.
Robert?
And just to add to the comments, the department has developed systems of delivery to allow us to actually move money out. So in our summer youth, for example, we've had a system of 13 providers that have been working for a number of years with us. We actually had the mechanisms to be able to move the contracts. So when the dollars came, we already had a system in place to actually move the dollars across. Same thing with our workforce side. Our new family source, which you helped lead here in the council, gave us the ability to do it on the CSBG side of the world and some of the CDBG public service dollars. So being able to have a strong provider system allowed us to really move dollars quickly.
Now, if you could go into just a little more detail on the 30% of the projects that are more challenging.
Okay, there are primarily three economic development projects. One is District Square, the other one is West Angeles, and the other one is the Lancet project in Council District 15. Each one of those we've achieved major milestones that put us much closer to being able to get the money out. With regard to Lancet, we signed an exclusive negotiating agreement with the developer. That's the first major step in moving the money. With West Angeles, we have just about concluded our negotiations and confirming a gap and being able to move that project forward.
Yeah, we better. We just broke ground.
We just broke ground yesterday, just in time.
I stuck a shovel in the ground. I want to make sure.
So we would not have let you do that if we didn't have confidence we were there. So we think we're going to be okay there. The third one, of course, is District Square. Still trying to manage a gap that we have there and finding enough money to move that project forward. But again, there's a relatively high level of confidence that we're going to be able to do that.
Okay, that's good. we were just joined earlier by Councilmember Richard Alarcon. You know what? I'm going to see the worst thing that my colleagues can do is leave me alone. So I'm going to make take councilmatic privilege here and ask Mr. Jim Clark to come up from the mayor's office. And I could just see it in his eyes. Oh, Lord.
Good morning, Councilman.
Good morning, my friend. Look, I do want to commend you on the fine work that you've done. And I know you've taken the point on a lot of this to make sure that we're on the front line applying for various grants, being successful. I'd like to get your read on why we're having difficulty in, we're getting the money in and not spending it. When you've got people who are out of work and what is the problem and what can we do to make sure that we put this money on the street where it belongs? We as a city made a commitment to the President of the United States that we were going to get this stimulus money and we were going to put people to work. What's the hiccup?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, it's a big concern to us, and that's the reason why the mayor has actually formed a team. There's 4 of us now on the team. Rushmore Cervantes, Greg Spots, Barbara Freeman, and myself are all part of the mayor's ARA team, and our primary purpose is to make sure that we're working with the departments to see that we're trying to eliminate any obstacles or roadblocks that keep us from being able to expend this money as quickly as we can and create as many jobs as we can. So that's our charge, and that's what we're trying to do.
So what have the obstacles and the roadblocks been?
Sure. Some of them, one of them would be an example of, we have a grant for $60.2 million, 10% of our almost 10% of our ARA award in what's called Smart Grid with DWP. Well, that's a 5-year program, and most of the money will be spent during the construction phase that will be done during the 3rd year. So it's on track for the expenditure of those funds, but you're not going to see a lot of those funds spent because they're in the design phase, in the planning phase right now. That's one issue. The other issue that we've had is that a lot of the work that where the cities that got credit were the cities that had money for, that had health departments, that had school districts within it, because they were able to spend that money very quickly. We don't have those sort of situations. A lot of our awards were for in construction projects, and those have a lead time with going out and getting bids on them. Most of all of those, and I think you'll have a chart there that you can refer to, that we have a lot of those that are now have been, the contracts have been issued, the work is going to be done. We've seen a large uptick in the last 2 months in our expenditure rate. And we're very serious about this because we've seen, as of yesterday, there was a congressional hearing in Washington, D.C., in which one of the chairman of the Republican chairman of that is introducing a bill to sweep any unobligated broadband funds, to take them back. We've heard other methods of taking back money that's not spent. So we're doing everything we can to make sure, but some of these things require contractual obligations, and there's just a process in getting those things to bid. But one of our roles, and I'll let Rushmore talk a little more about it, is to try to interact with the departments to make sure that we're getting these contracts let expeditiously and getting money spent as well, too.
Yeah, I think Jim's covered it fairly well. I just want to add one thing, shovel-ready has been synonymous with stimulus, and that wasn't necessarily the case. There are some grants that were made available that were for shovel-ready projects, or projects that we all currently provide services to the constituents of the City of L.A. There are a number of our grant projects, though, that the programs had to be designed. So there's a large number of projects that first had to go through the design phase.
It hasn't been designed, right?
Programs that had never existed before. The city received grants for programs that had not been created, so we had to create them from scratch, plan the actual programs. Such as energy efficiency grant programs. It was $37 million we received. We've had to create those from scratch. And then through that, once they're designed, then you have to go through the required competitive selection process, award the contracts. And as Jim stated, now that the contracts are hitting the street, we will see the expenditures go up. But I think it's important to note that not every single dollar the city was awarded was for projects that were ready to go right then and there. There was some planning that was required for many of the grants we received.
Okay, now there was some talk that based on the reduction in city staff, that had an effect on our ability to turn these things around. How accurate is that?
Well, that would be on a department-by-department basis. There have been general managers that have stated that they're spread thin and they're having to allocate staff to not only our, but other existing competing interests as well that they're required to perform. So in some cases, this probably was true. Just because we receive 10% admin dollars for a grant, as an example, you're not going to necessarily have dedicated staff just for that R. They're splitting their time amongst other functions they're required to provide for that department.
Okay, you spoke a few minutes ago about for some of these funds we have to create new systems. So I get that. That makes sense to me. But for what about our street services funds and things of that? And we don't need to create. How are we spending them at what rate? Or
a much faster rate. Street lighting, street services, those types of programs, we've been able to spend the money at a much faster rate than you would, say, other programs.
if I said what was our current expenditure rate, could you answer that? Do you track it?
Yes, we do. We're at 35% of the award amounts that we've been awarded. That's in the material that you have there. But like I said,
I just like hearing you say it.
We've had an uptick. We've had an uptick in the expenditure rates that we've had, again, because these contracts have come on. But it's pretty steady. If you take something like street resurfacing, they have a line that they've been following and tracking very well. And some of them actually, like street lighting, they've been able to, because of savings in the cost of these, they're actually going to be able to do some like 200 additional street lights, and so still be able to do it within time and do more than they were doing. So some of the programs are actually coming out at a faster rate. And again, a lot of the programs that CDD did that were in the workforce areas, they were able to get that money out and get that spent very well. The problem that we have, like Richard was saying, is when we get into economic development and we're having to deal with contracting and negotiating and putting agreements together, that's what slows things down.
So since you've expanded your team, will that give you the ability or the capabilities to kind of fast track some of these economic development projects?
Correct. That's what we've tried to do, is we've divided up the projects, we've identified them, we've basically developed Greg Spots has a color coding system of green, yellow, and red on projects, so we determine what their color coding is, and we particularly focus on the red projects to try and get those things moving and find out what the obstacle is to do that. And so we each have a basket full of projects, and we pursue those among the team to do that. And we found that, I got to say quite frankly, we found that half of the problems, a lot of times, with the slowness on expedite, are problems that we generate here within the city ourselves. It's one department waiting for another department to take some action. We're waiting for contract administration to issue an RFP. We're waiting for the city attorney to approve a contract. We're waiting for somebody else to do that. And so I think that's a value added that we're able to provide, because we go in there and we see that and get them both working on this together.
You mentioned that earlier this week there was a Republican chair of one of the committees that was, I guess, looking at the possibility of sweeping some unspent money. Are we in jeopardy? Are there areas of concern that we have that we could lose these funds? And if so, which ones might they be?
Well, there was an attempt at the end of last year by Jerry Lewis, the congressman from out in Riverside, who was ranking member on appropriations, to sweep all our unused ARA dollars. I mean, there's a feeling among the Republican members of Congress, a lot of them, that the stimulus program was just a big waste of money, and we ought to take back the money that's not been spent and use it to pay down the deficit. I mean, this is consistent with what they're doing also, where they're asking for $100 billion out of the current continuing resolution for this year, and we're seeing that even the president is proposing a cut of 7.5% in CDBG funding for next year. So, I mean, Congress is in a mood right now to try and take back any unobligated money, whether it be stimulus money, whether it be any unspent surface transportation authorization money, and we have money out there for projects that we've not spent that we're looking at and making sure that we try and get those things spent as well. You know, so they're looking at anywhere that they can to grab money.
So where are we exposed the most?
Well, we have, go ahead.
I think where we're exposed, Councilman, is in the area of those where we don't have obligations or planned contracts. Working with the CAO's office and the various departments, we took a look at all of the grants through the departments to find out, obviously, where they've spent the money, but what contracts have been executed or will be executed or plan to be executed. And when you add those together, it goes, the actual amount of money that we are going to be spending or plan to spend is not 35%, but at a much higher rate, about 55%, leaving us 45%. That 45% basically means then that's not going to be contract related. That's going to be primarily salaries and equipment that have yet to be spent. So now we look at it from that standpoint. With the amount of time we have left for these grants, the onus is on us, first of all, to get the contracts executed, but then with the equipment where we do have the ability to spend the money at a faster rate, let's go ahead and push forward and try to identify equipment that can be purchased as quickly as possible, leaving those with the remaining balance of salaries that obviously we can't pre-fund, but just basically will have to be spent through the course of the grants. So there's a large number of positions that are being funded to support these various grants, and that therefore is going to take some time. We can't draw any faster. So in essence, we're trying to whittle it down to where we can actually push the expenditures as much as possible. So to answer your question, where we're most vulnerable beyond the acquisition of equipment that we can pre-purchase would be the salaries that will be spent over the next 2 years implementing these programs.
Thank you. Mr. Alico?
Yeah, Jim, you said that some of the slowdown has to do with, or what did you call it, the inability to expedite or whatever, but has been slowed down by interdepartmental machinations. How much of that has resulted from furloughs?
I think some of it is furloughs, but I think more importantly, we find that in most of the cases, one department is waiting on another department to take some action on something, and they're just...
Is it because...
They're just not pushing to say...
They can't push it because they don't have staff to do it?
I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's entirely it.
In every action we take in City Council, we're finding slowdowns in the City Attorney's Office in terms of writing ordinances. We're finding slowdowns in City Clerk's Office in terms of processing payments for contracts. In contract administration, we're finding it's difficult for them to move. You mentioned street services. We're about 100 miles short of goal, a budgeted goal. We budgeted 230 miles, I believe. We're at this point, if we move forward fully budgeting staff and deleting the furloughs, we would still be about 30 or 40 miles short of our budget objective. And so, has anybody done an analysis on the negative impacts of furloughs on our ability to spend ARRA money?
We have, as we've been meeting with departments, raising issues with them as to what are the obstacles for you to be able to expedite it. And in some situations, some of it with like street services, some of it with the traffic signal people, we found out that having people on furloughs or having people take early retirement has had an impact on that, and we try to bring those to your attention when those issues come up that we think would seriously.
Well, our policy on the City Council has been that we shouldn't furlough anybody that is a revenue generator.
Right.
But what seems to be missing here is an understanding that sometimes the system fails, not necessarily because of individuals who have been furloughed, but because the furloughs have had a negative impact on the system. And so, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask for a report from the CAO and the CLA as to how the furloughs have impacted our ability to expend our money, have slowed down contracts and negotiations regarding contracts, and expenditures of dollars. The city clerk can't even process our GCP money, let alone, and it's no fault on the city clerk. They're jammed with furloughs, and ERIP considerations. And I would like for the report to tell us how we can recapture the policy that we passed as a council, that no position shall be furloughed that generates revenue. And I'd like to know which position specifically, so that we can get them back on full-time, so they can use the ERA money and other revenues that are coming in that we're failing to utilize because we can't process them on time. So, and then specifically, so if you accept that, we really need a report on that.
Well, what I'd like to do is, I think it's a fair question. What I don't want to do is create work that your team can't handle and slow down everything else that we're trying to do to make sure that we get the money out.
I understand.
But I do believe that there's a way that we can accommodate Mr. Alarcon. And my question to you is, can we get these answers that I think are very important questions without adversely affecting the other things we need to do? And that's, I want somebody, don't trip over yourselves, jump in and answer the question.
Well, the analysis can certainly be done. I mean, we've got Tyler here from the CAO's office that can address the timely reporting to address the councilman's concerns. But let's be frank, there's furloughs across the city, irrespective of the funding source within departments. Department heads and their staff are being asked to do more with less resources. The issue of dealing with various departments is just added to a list of priorities they have. They don't see it necessarily as an R project, they just see it as another project they have to work on. That's where the mayor's our team, working with the CAO's office, pushing this along. That's where we're getting these things done. That's why we've asked for prioritization of duties, looking at what is outstanding relative to contracts, and see how we can push forward. We can do the analysis, and I think it's certainly helpful. This would be something that can be done, but we'll still move forward to have these expenditures spent, or the R project moving as quickly as possible.
I get that. So let's do the analysis. And you have a representative from the CAO's office?
Tyler Munhall with the CAO.
Well, I'm glad that you spoke, because you look like you just got out of high school yesterday, and at least the bass in his voice let me know, because I was going to say, wow.
Thank you.
We're hiring high school seniors to work in the CAO's office.
Thank you, Councilman. That skincare is working, I guess. Just a couple of things on this. This is a great question, Councilman. I think it's important to note that these projects are mostly on time in terms of the grantor's timeline, the original timeline set out when we got the money. There are certain projects that we need to move forward, but just for the context of the conversation, I know there's political pressure to spend the money quickly, but in general, we're on time. The other thing that I just want to raise is, as we ask for additional information from departments, it is having an impact in terms of their ability to administer the R grants as well as the other programs. So I think this is fairly easy information to get. We have anecdotal information just from our conversations with departments, but as far as just the more slices we ask for of report backs from departments, it does impact their ability to, it spreads them thinner, is Just want to be aware of it.
No, I didn't ask the departments, I asked the CAO and the CLA to report back. I didn't ask the departments.
Still, Richard,
If I could finish, Mr. Chair, you gave me the floor and I want to finish my comments.
No,
'cause I
took
still
it
want to
back.
get back
I'll
to
give it to
street
you again,
services.
though, but I did take it back.
Yeah, but I do want to get back to the street services issue, which is a perfect example, where the council approves 230 miles, yet the department, the CAO is failing to authorize the department to hire positions necessary to accomplish the 230 miles. The CAO is focusing on bean counting, but not focusing on services that have been budgeted. It's the CAO's responsibility to wear both hats, to implement the policies that the mayor and the council have dictated by virtue of the budget. That's not just a money responsibility, that's also a service responsibility. And frankly, they failed miserably on street services in particular, where they have the funding to provide 100% goal, but the CAO is refusing to allow them to provide full-time employees where they are being furloughed. So this is a situation where I have said over and over for the last 2 years that the CAO is failing to do a surgical job of managing our resources and simply doing slash and burn across the board to cut money out of the budget, but failing to recognize that the services generate money. And in this case, with the ARA dollars, that's exactly what is going on, but it's also going on in other areas where we are not providing services, not because we can't afford it, but because we have this slash and burn mentality that any furlough is good, any is a reduction. It's not. A furlough could mean more cost to the city of Los Angeles, and that is why I do not accept your answer. Your job is to provide the services and the fiscal responsibility that is dictated by the council and the mayor, and you are failing to do that. You're failing to do that with regard to ARA. I mean, you'd have to be a fool to suggest that we're on target when all Congress has changed and is saying they want to take the money back. It is our responsibility to spend that money as quickly as possible. That's not a political issue. That's a fact. If we don't spend that money, we'll lose it. Now, where is it in the CAO's job description to allow us to lose money?
It's certainly not our goal to lose.
Well, thank you for that, but actions speak louder than words. You know, we got to get the furloughed people that we can afford back to work, and providing those services so that we don't lose millions and tens of millions of dollars in ARA money that is specifically intended to drive our economy. And by the way, with the furloughed employees, how are they driving the economy with 20% reductions in pay? That's penny wise and pound foolish.
Mr. Alarcon, you should, I'm going to request that you restate your request from them so that we make sure that it's crystal clear.
I want an analysis from the CAO and the CLA as to how the furloughs are impacting the provision or the expediting of ARA expenditures, recognizing that the federal government is considering taking that money back. And the faster we get going, the more beneficial it'll be to Los Angeles on the revenue side.
Okay. Now, is everybody clear?
Sure. Yes, sir.
On that? All right. I have one public comment card on that. Arnold, Mr. Sachs, start working your way down here. Oh, you can sit down. You don't have to stay there. You can move. It's okay.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Arnold Sachs. I appreciate your comments, Councilman Alarcon. But, question, the furloughs were put in place last year, 8 months ago? Why weren't reports done prior to the furloughs being put on the table, prior to the layoffs being put on the table? We heard a few times in this council chambers how projects couldn't be done because you didn't have the funding. Now you have the funding, but you don't have the manpower. You had the manpower, but you didn't have the funding. It's something, something, something. Get the 2 cars to connect. You know who gets the bill here? The public. The public always pays. Get the 2 cars to connect. I don't know how long this ad hoc committee has been meeting, but it should have been meeting when the furloughs were being discussed. Where were the reports saying, you know what, we're going to have to tighten our belt? That means everybody who works for the city will be taking on it, and who's representing the city will be taking on a bigger load, because we still have the same amount of population, but we have less people to serve. Where's that part of the conversation come in? I hear conversations regarding, you know, the pay raises and the laying off of employees, but where's the conversation about representing the public? Because they get the bill. They always get the bill. And it's another report to be done, and it's another report to be done, and we'll come back with more information. Where's the CRA funding? Where's the report on that? $930 million. Who knew? If the governor hadn't made his program viable or out loud, who'd know? Who would know that the city's sitting on $930 million worth of CRA funds? No one, except maybe a few select individuals, and they're not represented by anybody here.
Okay, thank you. Patrice, is there any more business before this committee? Then this committee is adjourned. So let it be written, so let it be done.